And after you finally get through that tools tutorial, you'll be able to take your initial knowledge check. We'll see if it explains how this works. If not, I'll say. Okay, one thing they're going to show you is that there's this I don't know button. But from what I've read online, there's no benefit to ever using that function. I mean, you're better off just guessing. There's no, if you click the I don't know button, it just counts you wrong. So you're always better just guessing, or if you think you have an idea, try your best. I mean, you can click it, I guess, if you have no idea, but it really is no better than just leaving a question blank on a test kind of thing. It doesn't really do anything to benefit you by telling them I don't know. So you should always try. I would not click the I don't know button if possible. It really shouldn't be something you're using, hopefully, too much on this. But you'll click Start Knowledge Check, and it will start with questions. Like I said, I don't know exactly how this initial knowledge check works, but I'm assuming the more questions you get right, it'll probably get a little bit higher level. If you miss questions, it'll probably get more basic. That's how the actual ALEKS test works. I don't know if this is the same exact thing. This one asks you to find the greatest common factor between these numbers. If you remember, a greatest common factor is the biggest number that divides into both of these. So a little bit of thinking, but 4 would be the biggest number that goes into these. But like I said, you have scrap paper. You could always, my advice is take the smaller number, list all the things that divide into 32, and then check them if they go into 36 or not. But you would see 4 is the biggest. For example, 8 goes into 32, but that doesn't work for 36. 16 goes into 32, but that doesn't work for 36. 32 goes into 32, but that doesn't go into 36. So 4 is the biggest one. That goes into both. So you click Submit. This one, it says Donna spent 32 bucks at a grocery store out of 80 bucks. They want us to figure out the percentage. This is something I don't know how good we are at doing. Basically, if you want to turn a fraction into a percent, you really need to turn it into a decimal. And unfortunately, you can see there's no calculator option. So this is where long division is going to come into play. How you can do division into a number that's smaller is you can actually add a 0. And when you do this, you basically are going to start with 0 point whatever, because basically I'm multiplying this by 10 to do this. So to undo that, I really got to move my decimal place to the right one up here when I write my answer, if that makes any sense. So if I started doing this, 80 times 4 would be 32, or 320, sorry. And you subtract, so this would actually just be 0.4, which to turn into a percentage, I would multiply by 5, or sorry, what am I writing? Sorry, to turn a decimal into a percent, you multiply by 100. So 0.4 is actually 40%. Another way you could do this question, and actually maybe I made this more complicated than it needs to be. You could also simplify this fraction. For example, 32 and 80 are both divisible by 8. So for example, 32 divided by 8 is 4, 80 divided by 8 is 10, and then you could also divide this by 2, so that would be 2 over 5. And that's something you might know how the percentage of, like 2 out of 5 is 40%, if you think about a test. Or if you kept it over 10, 4 out of 10 is 40%. You got 4 out of 10 questions right on something. So if you simplify the fraction, you might be able to get something that you know the percent. I don't know how good you are at turning fractions to decimals in your head, if that's a skill you have or not. But you could do long division. The only thing with long division is, especially when you're dealing with things like this that are going to be decimals, is you got to add zeros. But depending on how many zeros you add, you move the decimal place each time you do that. So if I had, for example, if I had to add another 0, I would have 0.0 to start, if that makes any sense. So that could be a little bit confusing. All right, but sorry if this video turns long because I'm explaining my thinking. Clear this. This is a difference of squares. Remember, when they factor, they don't want you to solve. They just want to kind of keep your answer in those binomials. But that would just be x plus 7, x minus 7. So that would be one I would hope you would pick up if you saw. This is like a literal equation they want us to solve for b. I don't know how visual you are, but you'd have to divide the 5 over. So you'd really have r over 5. And then you'd have r over 5 equals b plus 5. So you'd have to subtract that 5 over. Oops. So it should be this if you can see. Like I said, you'll have scratch paper. But that would be my answer for this one. This is simplifying radicals. This is something, I'm posting this like January 19th. But this is something we will cover in chapter 6, like very shortly. Like actually this week we'll be looking at things like this. I'm just gonna miss this question. I'm gonna think the answer is 2. That is not correct, but let's just to kind of demonstrate. Maybe if I miss some questions, we'll see what it gives. This is exponent rules. This is something we just actually talked about in class today. The negative exponent means you flip it, but then you have to square both of these numbers. So 3 squared is 9. 8 squared would be 64. Just be really careful when you're taking the test too that you don't make typos. Take your time. Always check yourself before you click submit. Don't rush. There is no time limit. Notice, as I'm taking this test, there isn't a time limit anywhere. It's not like they're tracking time. I don't think that is a factor in your score. I'll double check. But everything I've read online about the ALEKS test is that it's an untimed test. So don't be afraid to take a few minutes on a question if you need to. It's not a big deal. But I know that's kind of the opposite if you're preparing for like the ACT or the SAT, for example. This is another question. Like I said, we'll be looking at kind of how to do a question like this in class. I'm actually just going to type in the answer, but this is something that you would be okay with dealing with radicals. That would just be 5. But this is, like I said, I know if you're watching this video the day I posted, it probably doesn't make sense, but this is something we will talk about in chapter 6. I'll just do this one really quick as well. Just make sure that would be 21. That works. And then that would be 4 times 3. Okay. Make sure I don't make a silly mistake. This is actually something we'll see. This might be chapter 8, so this might actually be something we don't see. But this is something we will mention. This is something I hopefully will mention. But if you ever, I know this is crazy because we got all these variables, but basically anytime you divide a fraction over a fraction, you can turn this into a multiplication question. Basically keep this the same. But when you divide by a fraction, you really could that's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So we could turn this into a multiplying question, just flip this fraction essentially. So put the 7x to the 5th, y to the 3rd up top, and put the 9n to the 5th on the bottom. And then really from here, it's just a bunch of exponent rules. Like we want to multiply the top and we got to do some division. So I'm just going to multiply these out. There might be some shortcuts if you want to cancel some stuff out and then do this. But if you multiply at the top, you'd have 21 mn squared x to the 5th, y to the 3rd. There's really nothing you can do with those to start. And then on the bottom, I'm going to multiply it out too. So 14 times 9, that'd be 90 plus 36. That would be 136 x squared y n to the 5th. Oh no, undo. Just so you know, I just controlled Z. If you're like pretty good with Word, if you make a mistake, you can undo in Word, Control Z. That also works here, just a heads up. Then we want to simplify these. So I'll do one variable at a time. So the x's, for example, I could subtract. So I would take away 2 x's from the top here. So now there'd only be 3. For the n's, since I actually have more on the bottom, if I subtract these, I'd have negative 3n. So that would actually flip to the bottom. I'd actually kind of have like 3 n's on the bottom. Really, the idea is, like I said, I don't know how many people are really going to watch this, but really the idea is if I have 2 ends on the top and 5 ends on the bottom, when I cancel out these couple pairs, I still have 3 ends left over on the bottom, not the top. And then the y's, I have 1 y on the bottom, so I could just take away one of the y's up the top. The one thing that's kind of tricky on the is we got to make sure our fractions are simplified, and that's easier said than done, in my opinion. So just be really careful if you have a fraction answer. Just take a few, definitely take a few tries to see if there's anything that divides into both of these. Luckily, 21, the only things that multiply into or divide into 21 are 21, 7, 3, and 1 doesn't really count because that wouldn't do anything for a problem. So really, I just got to check this. Do any of these numbers go into 136? My advice is just get as close as you can. So for example, I know, for example, this is how my brain would work. I know 3 times 10 is 30. So 30, 60, 90, 120. I could get to 120, and then I could just count from there. 123, 126, 129, 132, 135. Nope, doesn't go into 136. Do the same thing with 7. For example, I know 7, I usually do 10. 7 times 10 is 70. So double it, that would be 140. If I want 1 less than that, I'd be at 133. Doesn't work. Last one, 21. Honestly, I would count on my fingers if I needed to. There might be a better way you could guess and check, but 40, 21, 42, 63, 84, 105, 136. So actually 21 and 136 do work. I lost track of my head, but that would be 1. And then 136, what was that? 21, 42. You also, like, I have 21 and 21 is 42. I could double that. So that'd be 4 would be 84. Wait, what did I just say? 21 and 21 is 42. Sorry, double that would be, yeah, 84. Okay, I was right. Add one more to that, it would be 105. And then 105 would be 136. So, but you should see that that's really going to be 1/6. Let me clear what I wrote here, but I do need to simplify that fraction. So that would just be 6 on the bottom. But one thing I'm noticing in a lot of these problems is when I have fractions, they do divide or simplify. And one thing I'm noticing a lot, actually, they simplify to be 1 over something. A lot of times they divide into each other. That's something I've noticed as I've been going through some of these problems. That would be my answer. So that's a tough one, though. I mean, there's a lot going on in that question. So definitely, like I said, take your time when you're doing, like, not, I mean, on this practice, it's not as big of a deal, but when you're actually taking the ALEKS test, please take your time. Okay, we got a word problem. We can see a fruit company delivers. One thing, if you see a word problem like this and you got 2 things, system of equations. You're going to probably, like, very common to see system of equations. So we're going to basically have 2 equations. We'll do elimination, substitution, or something like that. But this one, we have 3 large boxes. So 3x plus 5y equals 79 kilograms. We have 12x plus 2x equals 199. And you could do elimination. This isn't a super nice one. Well, I mean, I guess it's not that bad. You can multiply the top by -4. I'm just going to miss this question, but I mean, this would be one I would think you could do. And just be careful once you get your answer. You'll have to make sure you put your answers in the correct spot. But just for time in this video, I'll just say I don't know. But like I said, you really should never click this box if you're actually doing the test. We got a graphing question. But honestly, if you're seeing questions like this, things we've seen this year, that's probably a good sign. You want to be seeing some algebra level questions. If you're seeing a bunch of, like, basic calculations or proportions or, like, middle school level stuff, that probably isn't a great sign. I mean, don't, like, freak out. I mean, it is what it is. But if you're starting to see some hard questions or things you haven't seen yet in this class, like, that's actually probably a good thing. Even though it probably doesn't feel good when you're actually taking the test. But to graph this parabola, you would start with the vertex. So that would be 4, 2, if you remember how to get your vertex. Oops. How do I actually graph? Oh, I'm doing my annotation tool. So graph a function. So sorry, my first point, I was just going to read out what it tells. Okay, I guess you gotta. This is kind of a weird menu. I'm kind of learning as I'm going through this myself. But one way is you just plot points. So, oops. So 4, 2. I think there's a way maybe you can actually like click on the graph. But okay, and we got to get some more values. So we got to, if you read the directions, they want 2 points on the left of our vertex and 2 points on the right. So I could plug in any numbers, but I mean, I would probably do maybe -3. So if I kind of work that out, -3 minus 4 would be -7. Square that. What? Or not -3. What am I? Sorry, I'm like doing this on the fly, but +3. So 3 minus 4, sorry, would be -1. -1 squared would be +1 plus 2 would be 3. So 1 point would be 3. What did I just say? 3, -3, 3. And just, I mean, it makes sense. It is making that shape. If you remember there's symmetry. So for example, I know 5, 3 is going to be a point. And then I got to get one more point on both sides. So I could plug in 2, for example. 2 minus 4 squared would be -2. So -2 squared would be +4. Plus 2 would be 6. And then keep in mind, it's, I mean, you could plug it in if you want to see, but 6 would also be the same point. It's going to be symmetrical. If you remember when you did your tables where your y values were the same. I'm going to cut off this because I ran out of time during my lunch when I was making this video. But then you would click graph a function. It'll automatically graph between the points you plot. But then you'll see, like, I mean, different questions. But if you want to go through this, I think it's 20 questions that'll have you do. It might go up to the full 30. The actual ALEKS test, I believe, is 30 questions, but I think this free trial only goes up to 20 questions. But if you want to give this a try, it might not be a good thing to kind of get you used to at least what to kind of expect when you're doing it on the computers.